when the service is up, what is the time when it is disrupted, and then you put a simple formula to say how much time this application is available. And that's basically high availability. You use multiple availability zones, you use redundant services, and you try and keep your application available and working. But we all understand that we are all working with technology, and though we have availability zones with separate power lines, we have lots of redundancy that's built in, lots of connectivity, a disaster can still happen. And a disaster is an event that is really disastrous in nature, right? Now, again, there when we talk about DR and disaster recovery, we generally say after a failure, how soon can we recover? That's basically where we talk about disaster recovery. So we first say we are highly available, then we say we anticipate failures. We assume that a failure may happen someday for some reason, and if that failure happens, how do we recover from that failure? So that's basically what we're doing with disaster recovery, right? So why could failures happen? Failures could happen because of natural causes sometimes, right? So it could be a flood, it could be like an earthquake or any such kind of large disaster that happens, and a particular availability zone or a particular region gets impacted by that. And your application was running in that, and suddenly now your application is unavailable and you don't have a way to kind of access your application, right? So that's one of the reasons. Less likely to happen, but yeah, I mean, it still can happen, and it's definitely not something that has never happened. Right? Then there are more likely scenarios. There's ransomware attacks that can happen. There could be a compromise. We talked about security, we talked about compliance, we talked about having the best levels of security, but then there could be a bad actor, there could be a bad employee, or there could be a different kind of scenario where somebody could try and create a ransomware attack, or try to mess with the system, and then you need to recover from that. And as a business, those kind of things could be really fatal, right? Because if somebody went and encrypted all your data and said, now pay me $1 million before I can release it to you, you just kind of put yourself in a position where it's make or break for most companies at that point, right? So you want to kind of insure yourself from that, and that's another kind of scenario that can happen. And then there are obviously technical failures. This works on power, internet, and a bunch of other things. There could be a power grid outage that can happen. There could be like a internet submarine cable that could get disrupted, and that could again cause issues. So when you have failures like this, it's time to work or something, yeah, so time to work out from it. Yeah. So when you have failures like these and you want to recover from that, that's when you want to do disaster recovery. And the whole idea of doing that thing is to anticipate that, plan for it, and then have disaster recovery measures in place. And that's when you need a DR strategy and to make sure that your business is resilient.
So, Harish, what DR strategy you implemented at Paytm Money?
So, at Paytm Money, we chose the pilot light DR strategy. The reason we chose is because it's an optimal balance between a DR values for RTO and RTO. It offers in tens of minutes, if I'm not wrong, and against the cost of operating the DR implementation itself. So that is what we have chosen as a business, and I think for anyone who is starting up with a DR implementation, I think that would be a reasonable strategy to start with before they move on to an active strategy eventually. So that's what we have at Paytm.
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle that when I discuss with any of the brokers, that that the first thing that comes, यार एक ही बिजनेस चलाने के लिए दो इंफ्रा में खर्च करना पड़ेगा. So that's the biggest thing. I think one is a light DR strategy is something to start with. Yes, it's a good idea.
Correct.
So I believe, so I know, so it's Mumbai and Hyderabad, right?
Yes. So our DR is basically out of the AWS Hyderabad region. That's where we have implemented our DR solution.
And why so? Why not Mumbai? Because you are already present in two.
Right. Arguably you could say that you could potentially use the different availability zones within Mumbai itself. But as you may be aware, the regulations require the minimum of 250 kilometers, distance between the primary and the disaster recovery sites. So, AWS Hyderabad was the only choice we had. So, we obviously chose it.
So, Amit, what is the mode of connectivity between the two sites?
So both sides we have connected via VPC peering and with necessary port allowed at security group level. So this is the level of connectivity we have done.
So in terms of, so we were talking about DR strategies that you were normally. So what are the different DR strategies that are available, AWS specific?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, generally it's not specific to AWS, but we generally, we recommend customers to kind of, look at what their requirements are and then adopt a particular strategy. So I think, Harish already mentioned about the pilot light strategy, which is one of the strategies. He also, mentioned a little about RTO and RPO. So I'll try to kind of, break down those words a little. Generally, when we look at DR strategy, we start with a simple thing, right? I mean, this is something that we all probably did as kids, and at any time we wanted to kind of use a computer system, backup le lo. The pehle thing is put your backup into a thumb drive. So the same concept, take all your important data, take all your applications, back them up, and put them in another place, so that if you have a disaster, you can restore. So that's the strategy we generally call backup and restore. Now, what the good thing about that is it's the cheapest thing to do, because you just are compressing everything into maybe a few files, and the storage of that file is what you're paying for, and you're just putting it in another place, and you can restore it when you want. The problem is it takes a lot of time to restore it, because now you have the backups, but for you to kind of then go and set up everything from scratch, set up your entire infrastructure, set up all the servers, get those databases restored, and then start up. It may take a few hours if you're lucky. Sometimes it may even take a couple of days to kind of do that whole thing, depending on how complex the infrastructure is, right? So that is where a backup and restore, what we talked about, the RTO and RPO, it comes down to what your recovery time objective is, how quickly do you want to recover, and what your recovery point objective is. How much data can I lose, right? So if you take backups once a day, you're probably going to, and let's say you had a failure in the middle of the day, you lost about 12 hours of data. So that's basically what you're defining for your business as your recovery point objective, right? So that again, it largely depends on each company on where they want to kind of place that. But the starting point is usually at least get backup and restore as your first strategy. What's more likely to happen is something like the pilot light strategy, where again you're not spending too much money. It's a little more expensive than backup and restore, because you still set up some bit of infrastructure in, let's say, the Hyderabad region or some other region. If you are in Hyderabad, then maybe in the Mumbai region, and you're setting up some bit of infrastructure. But AWS does not charge you for any computers that aren't running, that any servers that aren't running, right? So you do not get charged for anything that you just set it up, you shut down everything, and you retaining that in a shutdown state. You're only syncing data from time to time. When you have a need to recover, you just have to go and switch on servers and then scale it, and then you can switch over to that particular region, right? This is what we call the pilot light strategy. It's a light DR strategy. While it is definitely a very strong strategy and a lot of customers use it, the recovery time now has come down to maybe a couple of hours. So it's come down from days to hours. It can go down further to minutes with what we call a warm standby strategy. A warm standby is you don't shut down those servers, you actually keep them running, but you're not fully scaled over there. You just keep your minimum things, your database is already running, some of your servers are already running. Now you just start sending traffic there, and they auto scale and they kind of grow there. And so you are ready to kind of just switch over. You can switch over in minutes, because the only time you take is just to scale, because everything is ready. And then there is what we call like active or a hot standby, which is basically that you have both regions completely running, and you can actually run from anywhere. Any single user traffic that comes to you can be sent to this region or to that region. Both sides, you're running the full thing. Obviously the most expensive thing to run, but your recovery time is in seconds. You can switch over from here to there in the matter of seconds. 2 seconds, 3 seconds, you can just fail over and you can go there. So that's basically the kind of thing you do. And when you, let's say, have a bad code push and something went wrong, and you decide, oh, this is now going to, how many hours can you lose, right? If you decide that it is a few seconds, you just switch over in those seconds. And that's basically the strategies that we typically employ.